The advanced panel. The original Bberheim synthesizer was very limited in terms of modulation and effects, but here Arturia included an extra panel for us to play with. So this is really amazing and very, very easy to use modulations and effects section. Let me show you what we have here. So first of all, we have the modulation and this section. So you just flip between the two by clicking this big button here. Here in the modulations, we have two sections also. We have the functions and we have the modulation matrix. Let me show you the function first, and then we'll go over the modulation matrix. Modulations functions. Here we have 4 slots. They are identical. Each one can be set to one of 50 destinations. So for example, let's take the filter frequency. Then we can set the amount of modulations that we would like to have on that destination. So I'll take 100% in this example. And now we need to set an envelope or function to actually work on that particular destination. So what I'm expecting now is to have the filter frequency cutoff point to change over time according to this function. Let's hear it. And without. Let's go over everything that we have here, and then we'll do some more examples. So first of all, we have the on and off button. Next, we have the destination selector, one of 50 destinations. Then we need to set the amount of modulation that we would like to have applied. And here in the middle section, here in the middle panel, we have the actual function, the envelope. Next, we have some other buttons here. First of all, key trigger. Right now, every time I play a note, this envelope, this function, will restart. But if we turn this off, we'll see that the envelope continues and we can play through. Loop will turn on and off the looping, which means that this function will work for one time only. So if I'm playing a note continuously, the function will work for one time and then it will stop. But if we turn on the loop, we'll see that this goes on and basically looping. The poly button will turn on and off the poly effect for this function, meaning that when we are turning it on, it will work separately on each voice. But if we turn it off, it means we're in mono, which is basically like saying that this function will work on all voices at once. Next, we have the total length. Right now, it's set to 1 bar. But let's see what happens when we set it to quarter. So this is matching our BPM. Right now, we're in sync, meaning we're synced to our host, but we can do it freely. So right now, this is half a second. And back to sync. Here on the button, we have few other things. For example, we have the number of points, and we can add more points. We can see the level and time of each point. So when I hover over any of these points, we can see the values changing. Next, we have some presets. So what I can do is click this preset and get the function to be assigned according. So I can do this, or something very complex like this. Very nice. And of course, we can add more and more such points. For example, clicking here and here, and I'm just randomly doing some things here. Now, in the middle between each 2 points, we have these little triangles. And if you click and pull them up or down, you'll see that you can create curves. And again. That concludes the modulation functions. The modulation matrix. Here we can assign any of the 50 destinations to one of 5 modulators, which are the velocity, the key, aftertouch, mod wheel, and the filter envelope. Let's see how that works. The modulation matrix has 6 columns. This means I can assign 6 different destinations for my modulators. Let's see how that works. So for example, I can click the None title here, get my menu of options, and select, for example, the vibrato depth. And now I can assign this to any of these modulators by clicking and dragging up. So for example, let's click here on the mod wheel and drag up all the way for the full effect. Now when I'm playing a note and turning on and off my mod wheel, will have more or less vibrato. I can also assign this, for example, to the velocity. This means that when I play a note and I hit it hard, I'll get more vibrato. If I hit soft, then I'll get less vibrato. Let's set the next one for the frequency of the filter. And now let's use that also on the mod wheel. Let's see how that works. And what we got here is that the mod wheel is affecting our frequency cutoff point. If we want to clear out one of these destinations, we'll click the title and select None. If we want to clear the assignment, double-clicking, we'll just get it disappeared. Let's try something else. I'll click the title here to select the destination, and we can select the LFO rate. Now let's assign this to, for example, the mod wheel. We don't really hear anything. Why is that? That's because we didn't assign our LFO to anything. Let's go back to our modulation in the main panel and set the LFO to affect something. So for example, let's turn on the oscillator here, get the depth all the way. But what I want to do is I want to set this to 1 bar. Now we get the full effect. So have a look. The more mod wheel we get, the more of the effect. So what we've done is selected the LFO rate as our destination. We selected the mod wheel and turn it all the way up for the full effect. Next, we assigned the LFO to our oscillator frequency here, and that's pretty much it. Now, if the effect is way too much, we can reduce the amount here to something more moderate. Pretty cool, right? Let's clear that, double click, and let's select something else. For example, we can select the filter resonance. And again, let's set that to our mod wheel. Let's try something else. Let's replace the filter resonance with, for example, the master volume. So in fact, we are controlling the volume using our mod wheel. Let's do something else. Select, for example, the reverb. And now we can actually do a lot of things manually and control our reverb time with our mod wheel. Let me go back to the main panel here so you can see the mod wheel in action. So this is the mod wheel. I'm going to play a note and then turn on the mod. And again, we can remove the LFO from the previous example. And going back to our modulation matrix, double click, remove this, clicking here. Let's find something else to play with. For example, we can play with the X mode. So reminding you that the X mode is the effect of taking the second oscillator and affecting it on the first oscillator. Now, let's find something to actually use it. And I can do this in different ways. For example, I can set it to the velocity. This means the harder I play, the more X mode I get. I can also do this with the aftertouch or, for example, the mod wheel. Now let's set something else. We'll click here and select, for example, the delay. And again, let's use the mod wheel. And as you can see, when I'm using the mod wheel, I'll get just more of the delay. And let's do another example. Let's select here something like the vibrato rate and see how that works. So I'll set this to our mod wheel as well. And I can double click here to remove those. And let's move on, select something else. For example, let's do this on the ARP rate. So selected the ARP rate and select the mod wheel. But we need to engage the arpeggiator. So let's do that. Let's hear how it sounds right now. can select different patterns and different octaves. Now let's assign that. So we have our arpeggiator and the mod wheel, and when I'm moving the mod wheel up and down, I'll get higher rates of the arpeggiator. This concludes our modulation matrix part. The effects. In order to assign effects, we need to go to the Effects tab here, and now we can see that we have 3 different slots. Each of them can be assigned to one of 9 effects. Let's see what we've got here. We have Reverb, Delay, Chorus, Flanger, Phaser, Overdrive, Compressor, Beat Crusher, and Multimode Filter. Let's review all the effects that we have. Before that, a quick note. As you can see, each of these slots has a bypass button, dry-wet selector, and serial or parallel selector. If we set this to serial, it means that the signal will go through the first slot and then to the next and then to the last. If we set this to parallel, the signal will split between the 3 slots. So let's get started and review the reverb. Reverb. Let's hear our sound without reverb. Pretty dull, right? Now let's set some reverb. And more. And too much. Now let's go over all these options here, all the buttons. So damping is to control the brightness of the sound. This is done by attenuating the high frequencies. The MS mix is to control the stereo width of the reverb. Pre-delay will set just a slight amount of delay before the signal is injected into our reverb. Decay will set how much time it takes for the reverb to echo and fade away. Size controls the size of our space, and as you can imagine, if we have a small space, that will be a smaller or more condensed type of reverb, and a larger size will get us more of the space echoing into our signal. Let's hear how that sounds. Now, a very special effect is when we are changing the size during play. So you can definitely use this when you're modulating the patches that you create. Next, we have low-pass filter and high-pass filters to control the overall frequencies that are outputting through our reverb. The chorus effect. So this module recreates the sound of multiple takes of an instrument being combined in a mix. The effect works by duplicating the incoming signal, delaying one side while using an LFO to slowly modulate the delayed time and mixing the delayed signal back with the original sound. Let's see how that works. So first of all, I'm going to set the dry-wet. We can select different LFO shape, number of voices. The delay sets the time for the chorus effect. Stereo mode is the output of the chorus that can be set to stereo for a wider and more modern sound, or mono for a more vintage sound. Depth will set the strength of the LFO modulation on the delay signal. Frequency will adjust the speed of the chorus by setting the LFO rate. Feedback determines how much of the chorus output is fed back to its own input. The flanger. Let's hear it first. So the flanger is an effect that is similar in principle to the chorus effect, except that the delay time tends to be much shorter, and the extremely short delay time produces a comb filter effect that sweeps up and down through the harmonics of the original signal. So first of all, we have the shape for our LFO. This will produce different sounding outputs. We have polarity. This determines whether the feedback polarity will be positive or negative, and you have to experiment with this in order to appreciate the difference. So let's try that. Stereo is the output of the filter that can be set to a wider and more full stereo sounding flanger, while if we set it to mono, that will be a more vintage sound. Let's hear it. Frequency sets the LFO modulation rate for the minimum delay time. So let's hear that. The minimum delay sets the minimum limit for the delay time, which can be useful for controlling the flanger's harmonic content. Again, these settings are really hard to grasp just, by saying them. We actually need to experiment and hear the effect. Depth sets the strength of the LFO modulation, and feedback determines how much of the flanger's output is fed back to the original sound and mixed in with the input. In addition, of course, we have low-pass frequency and high-pass frequencies to set the low-pass and the high-pass cutoff frequencies for the flanger. The phaser module. This effect adds motion and swirling character to the sound. It works by splitting the incoming signal, changing the phase of one side and recombining it with the unaffected signal. Let's listen to the phaser. This is without and with. Let's go over all these options. So first of all, the LFO rate. This sets the speed of the LFO. Sync will lock the phaser to our host or DAW. So we can use it either synced or free. Next, we have the rate synced. So here we have three options: the binary, ternary, and dotted. Next, we have the LFO amount. This sets the strength of the LFO modulation. And we have the LFO shape. So right now you can see it's triangle, but it can be sine, sawtooth, ramp, square, and sample and hold. Frequency sets the center frequency of which the phaser affects the incoming signal. Feedback effectively controls the amount of phaser resonance, but look out for a higher setting can make filtering effect very pronounced. End poles. This sets the number of poles used for the sweeping filter. And last, stereo. This sets the stereo width of the effect. The compressor module. At its core, a compressor is simply a device that is used to maintain a consistent level of sound. You can think of it as a very fast manual control that turns down the volume when the input is too loud and raises it back again when the loud parts have passed. So learning about compressors is outside this course, but let's go over the controls that we do have here. The controls are makeup. This switches the compressor automatic makeup gain feature on and off. Next, we have the attack. This sets the speed in which the compressor will react to an incoming signal. The release will set the release time for the compressor. Threshold sets the loudness level above which the compressor will begin to start and work. The input gain adds gain to the signal before the start of the compression process. And ratio will set the ratio of the compression. And last, we have the output gain that controls the final output level of the compressor. Let's see how that works. Here we can see how much of the signal is being attenuated by the compressor. You can see that I can set the threshold for the compressor to start and work. The bit crusher. So this instrument generates a very high fidelity sound. However, in some scenarios, you may prefer a gritty lo-fi sound. So the bit crusher effect can really help make this happen. So it adds nasty digital distortion, and intentionally reducing the bit depth will really make the sound vintage and distorted. So let's try it out and see how it works. So right now, I'm setting the dry-wet ratio. Next, we can set the bit depth. So right now, we have 16 bits, but we can reduce this to, say, for example, 8 bits. Again, without and with. Downsampling will resample the already bit-reduced signal, and as you turn the knob, you'll see that we get a very cool effect. So let's try that. Of course, it will be a very good idea to modulate and automate those controls to get some very cool effects. In fact, let's do that right now. So I'm going to go back to modulation, and we can set the mod wheel to control that bit crusher. So I'm going to set this all the way up, select the effects, and we have bit crusher here. And let's see how that works. Multimode filter. So while we do have a filter in this instrument, it is very limited and it is only a low-pass filter. Here we can select between low-pass, high-pass, band-pass, and comb filters. Let's see how they work. So first of all, we can set different slopes, and we can set the resonance and even have some visual representation of what we are doing. We can actually automate this. Let's go to our modulation tab and select mode wheel and set this to our multimode filter. And now, when I'm playing with the mod wheel, I'll control the filter. That's the basic idea. So this is the multimode filter, and as you can see, pretty straightforward and very easy to use.